instead of just focusing on one technique to do everything, I break it down into about four different techniques that I can use depending on the application and the tempo and accent placement, things like that. The first technique is a wrist turning motion. A precursor to that obviously would be gripping points on the stick. I try to find the balance point and then utilize a middle finger fulcrum. As far as French versus German grip, I typically find myself finding the happy medium between the two, which is American grip. You may find the grip angle of your wrist changing, depending on what surface of the kit you're playing on, and that's fine. None of those is inherently better or worse than the other. They just have some different strengths and weaknesses. Anyhow, with the wrist turning technique, you're simply isolating the wrist from your arm. You don't want to use your whole arm too much, as it's just not all that efficient. So, isolating the wrist and using a turning motion. This is a great technique for creating a lot of volume and a nice even dynamic during a blast beat. The downside of it is you may find yourself running into a speed barrier at around, 220, 240, 260, somewhere in there. So the next technique can help you push maybe a little bit beyond that, and that would be the flying finger technique. That is simply a pulling motion, an upstroke with the fingers. That one is most effective on a higher rebound surface, such as a cranked snare drum, a ride cymbal, the top of the hi-hat, things like that. I don't use this technique a whole lot in my actual playing. I look at it primarily as a conditioning motion to strengthen the individual fingers, and for that, it's very effective. The downside of this is you might struggle to play across surfaces like the toms with less rebound. So again, I look at this primarily as a conditioning technique. The next motion is the Moller motion. To put that simply, it is a whip, a tap, and then an upstroke. I primarily use this for triplets. You can also do fours. I used that motion a lot back in the day, in the early 2010s, and it's very effective. You can place accents with that whipping motion on the ride bell or cymbals, pretty efficiently. But I found that the next technique allowed me to stay a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more efficient, and that is the push-pull. The push-pull is simply a downstroke with the thumb and then an upstroke with the fingers. This motion is fantastic for staying relaxed, and you can also achieve a pretty decent volume with it. That's often a criticism is, you got this really small motion, it's not going to be powerful enough, but you can get pretty decent volume with it, and microphones exist for a reason, so there's that. The beauty of this technique is that you're able to push past some of those speed barriers I mentioned before, because this motion is just so efficient. There are some freaks of nature out there that are able to just use that wrist or isolated finger motion to absolutely crazy tempos, but for the rest of us, you're likely going to be able to build up more speed in a lesser amount of time using something like push-pull or Moller technique. So that's why I always tend to gravitate towards those motions. So that's pretty much the whole system. Additionally, you can also do triplets with push pull. That's an interesting technique because the grouping of notes ends up being like two triplets instead of one grouping of three notes with the Moller technique. So that creates a little bit different pulse. So depending on the application, you can use either one of those interchangeably. Um, but that is another technique to work on is the push pull triplet. So that's pretty much the system right there. If you work on all four of those, I guarantee you're going to see some improvement. So have at it. Get out there and grind. Let me know if this was a helpful video.